According to scientists, the number one food we should all be eating more of to reduce our risk of chronic diseases, things like heart disease, diabetes, dementia, and stroke, are whole grains. The Global Burden of Diseases study is the most extensive and comprehensive study of causes of death and disability globally. They also break it down by region and by country. It's conducted by over 9,000 researchers in 162 different countries, and it gives us a really good indicator of what we can be doing better. What they found is that poor diets have overtaken tobacco as the number one driver of chronic health problems. About 1 in 5 deaths could be completely avoided by making different dietary choices. Of these diet-related deaths, about half of them are down to 3 choices we make in our diets. 1, eating too much salt, 2, not eating enough fruit, and 3, not eating enough whole grains. Now, most people know what salt and fruit are, but very few people seem to really understand what whole grains are, when they're healthy, when they're not so healthy. So I'm going to cover that today in the video. Whole grains are also known as cereals. They're from the grass family, and they include things like oats, millet, rice, barley, spelt, and even sweet corn, which nearly everyone thinks is a vegetable. We often also include foods that we call pseudo-whole grains, such as quinoa and amaranth, which are actually seeds, but they have an almost identical nutritional profile to whole grains, except they're higher in protein. All whole grains have 3 layers. The outer bran layer, which contains much of the fiber and lots of the vitamins, the fluffy endosperm layer, and the inner germ layer. All 3 layers are beneficial. In general, the more we process a whole grain, the less benefit we get from it. In fact, after a certain amount of processing, we start to increase the risk of harm to our health. Let's take oats as an example. If we had the whole grain, pretty much as it came from the plant, we would have an oat groat. This is the best way to eat it, but it isn't so easy to cook. Whole grains that you're more likely to come across in this state are brown rice, millet, or brown barley. Just below this are sliced grains such as pinhead or steel-cut oats. Rolled oats are just below this. They're steamed, rolled, and flattened so that they cook more easily. It's worth mentioning at this point that things like white rice and pearl barley have had the outer layer, the bran layer, removed, so they're not whole grains. This means they have lost 90% of their fiber and many of their vitamins. On the other hand, not all processing is bad. When grains are sprouted, this breaks down a lot of the starch and phytates, making the nutrients more available. It can also improve the digestibility of the grains, which can be helpful for anyone who has digestive sensitivity to grains. If we carry on, we can finally grind up grains into flours and then reconstitute them into bread or pasta, for example. By the time we have puffed and flaked a grain, we've largely lost most of the fiber and nutrients, and its sugars are released very rapidly into our bloodstream, so we're likely to get insulin spikes. Finally, a lot of foods are marketed as whole grain products, but they're very processed with lots of additives, and these can do significant harm to our health. So if you want to eat healthy whole grains, aim for the top left of this chart. As you move down and to the right, these start to become more harmful to our health. It's worth noting that we don't have legislation in the UK for what can be labelled and marketed as a whole grain. This means that people can purchase foods that only have a tiny quantity of whole grains. There's just a nod towards whole grains, but they are marketed as healthy when really they're very ultra processed and they're actually doing harm to your health. As a guide to choosing healthy whole grains, here are 4 tips. 1, have it as the actual intact whole grain, for example, as brown rice or as oats, as a standalone product. 2, only choose products where the whole grains are in the top 2 ingredients on the packet. 3, choose foods that are higher in fiber. For example, if you look at the nutrition label, it should have at least 6 grams per 100 grams. 4, Choose foods that only have a few ingredients, particularly avoid foods that have added sugar, fat or salt, or emulsifiers or other preservatives. These are probably not doing your health any benefit. So now I hope you have a really good idea of how to choose whole grains so that they are actually benefiting your health.